So, when I'm traveling, for example, the United States of America, and I'm sitting in my ugly motel room at the end of the day and I feel a little homesick, there is luckily one app on my smartphone that always keeps me connected with the people back home. And that is, right, WhatsApp. In my home country, Germany, around 58 million people use this messaging app every day. That's around 70% of the population. The company Meta, which owns this messenger, WhatsApp, announced this number officially in 2019. That means almost everyone who owns a smartphone in Germany has this app installed, and almost everyone can be reached via WhatsApp, despite all sorts of data protection discussions in recent years. Over the years, WhatsApp has replaced what once used to be the SMS, a technology that allows you to always stay in touch with all your friends and family. And that's not only the case in Germany. WhatsApp is also the #1 messaging app in many other European countries and the undisputed market leader in this area. The same applies to many countries outside Europe, like India or Brazil or Indonesia. But what if I would tell you that here in the United States of America, outside my ugly motel room, the situation is a bit different? There are no 100% reliable numbers of usage in the United States, at least not from WhatsApp itself. But according to various surveys that can be found online, around 70 to 80 million Americans use the app WhatsApp. That is, right, still more than in Germany, but when you consider that there are 340 million people living in the USA, that's only a tiny proportion, just 20 to 25%. This is quite interesting because WhatsApp is an American invention, but its greatest successes, this messaging app, celebrates somewhere else in the world. Okay, people from Europe, like me, now might think, okay, interesting fun fact, if the Americans don't use WhatsApp, like us, they probably use some other app. That's just how it is, other countries, other manners. But in fact, it's not that easy. Yes, most Americans do use another messenger, but it's actually not a real messenger. And here the whole story gets a bit complicated, and this whole situation has a quite weird effect on American society. If you take a look at American media, you will find many reports about this topic. Reports about young people being turned down by their dates, for example, or about teenagers who are laughed at, excluded, and even bullied in the schoolyard, or reports about students who are no longer informed about important news because they can't take part in group chats. Well, and that, to put it bluntly, is only because a messenger system like WhatsApp hardly plays a role in the United States of America. This has created a phenomenon for which the media and social media users have also invented a name: the so-called green bubble, blue bubble problem. Okay, and at this point you might ask yourself, huh? What kind of weird story is he just trying to tell me? And what does the choice of a messenger service have to do with bullying and dating and exclusion? I don't really get it. Perfect, because in this video I will tell you the strange story of why hardly anyone uses WhatsApp in the United States of America and why that is a problem. To understand why the WhatsApp Messenger never really caught on in the USA, we have to go back to a time before those messenger services became popular. We have to go back to a time when the good old SMS was invented. That happened, as you might remember, sometime in the 1980s. In 1984, to be precise, the short message service was first introduced. By the 2000s, the SMS became the #1 means of communication in Europe. In 2005, for example, 20 billion short messages were sent in Germany, and usage reached its absolute peak in 2012 when there were almost 60 billion. At that time, and this should also be mentioned, there were of course already messenger services at this point, but with them you were basically tied to your computer. ICQ, for example, was a messenger that was very popular in Germany and was also promoted by big TV stations. But differences in usage in different countries could also be seen even back then. If I wanted to chat with people from abroad in the 2000s, most of them used the MSN Messenger, and ICQ didn't really play a big role. But back to SMS. In 2013, the usage of this service suddenly decreased in Europe. This may also have something to do with the fact that first the smartphone and then the WhatsApp Messenger became popular. The service was founded by Brian Acton and Jan Koum, former Yahoo employees, and in Germany and many other countries around the world, you could quickly see how this messenger was rapidly making the use of SMS superfluous. The result, in 2022, only around 6 billion SMS messages were sent in Germany, an all-time low. But not like that in the United States of America. If we take a look at the SMS usage statistics, that's a complicated word, we can see Americans today send hardly fewer SMS text messages than at the peak in 2011, for example. At that time, 2.3 trillion short messages per year were sent. In 2022, it was still 2 trillion. And the emerge of messenger apps hasn't really changed much about this. But why? Well, maybe because sending SMS text messages in the USA has always been a little bit more attractive than in Europe. In general, mobile phone contracts in the United States of America are more expensive than in most European countries. As an example, here are a few current plans from AT&T or T-Mobile. If I compare that with phone plans in the UK or Scandinavia, you pay like half of the price or even a third. One advantage of contracts in the USA, however, is that even back then, when the mobile phone became popular, many phone plans already had all services included. For example, unlimited minutes and also unlimited text messages. That was not the case in my home country in Germany back then. There were either term contracts that had a certain SMS budget but were usually quite expensive, and then there were prepaid plans where you had to pay for every single SMS you sent. At the beginning, an SMS normally cost 19 cents, later it became cheaper, but the fact that you could simply send SMS unlimitedly and without additional costs was rather unusual. Not like that in the USA. Prepaid plans have never really caught on here. Anyone who has a cell phone usually also has a contract and, right, also an SMS flat rate. Well, and this basically is also the answer to the question why WhatsApp today hardly plays a role in the United States of America. When this messenger service was invented, it didn't really solve a problem here. SMS texting was already free, basically, so most Americans simply stuck with their old SMS service, and most of them didn't really think about switching services. Until this one day when the company Apple had a pretty clever idea. If you're an owner of an iPhone, then you may know about the existence of the so-called iMessage. If not, and yes, dear American friends, there are people who might not know that, here's the system briefly explained. iMessage is not a messenger app like WhatsApp. It's used on the standard messaging app on the iPhone, which normally receives and sends SMS messages. However, if there is another iPhone user on the other end of the line, the SMS that is normally shown in green will then turn blue. And instead of an SMS, you will send an iMessage with many great functions that are known from classic messenger services such as WhatsApp. And when Apple introduced this feature in 2011, iMessage from the beginning was an immediate success in the United States. At that point, as we already learned, the Americans were world texting champions, and at the same time, that's the second factor, the iPhone was already very popular in this country. According to statistics, more than half of the people in the United States own an Apple phone and less than half own an Android device. This is completely different in Europe. In Germany, the iPhone only has a market share of around 30%. So from that point on, people used iMessage to communicate. Over the years, more and more functions were added, and people didn't even have to switch their favorite messaging app. Well, actually, a pretty brilliant idea, isn't it? Well, at least for the company Apple. For the residents in the United States, this whole iPhoneization also has some disadvantages. There is a phenomenon that the US media calls the blue bubble, green bubble phenomenon, and this also has some bad consequences for people in their everyday lives. The problem is quite simple. The blue iMessage only works with people who own an Apple device. If you send such a message to an Android user, it turns green and becomes an SMS, a completely outdated technology. This has, for example, security-relevant consequences. The SMS is not encrypted because it is so old. So in theory, you could intercept these messages and read them. This does not apply to modern messenger services such as iMessage or WhatsApp or Signal or Threema or many others. Here the messages are end-to-end encrypted by default and are therefore significantly more secure. But there are other problems too. Since iMessage has evolved, Android users have also been cut off from many of the features that the service now offers. For example, this symbol when somebody is typing. That's just not possible with the old SMS. You can't track your friend's location if you don't have an iPhone. Photos and videos arrive completely pixelated because they are sent via MMS, a completely outdated technology. Well, and if an Android user wants to join a group chat, the messages also turn green and will also be sent as SMS, which is no longer as much fun as before. This circumstance is now causing some kind of I would call it discrimination of people who just don't want to or who just can't afford buying an overpriced Apple device. The Wall Street Journal interviewed young people for an article published last year, and it's really interesting what they said. Many people the journalist talked to fear exclusion because they own an Android device and are only able to send green text messages instead of blue ones. The social pressure is palpable, and some people are even ostracized after turning away from the iPhone, according to the newspaper's survey. Apple has effectively created a social network with functions to bind users and at the same time exclude others, a student complained to the newspaper. She reports a certain pressure to buy the supposedly right communication device. One woman says she's seen people with Android smartphones apologizing for having Android devices but no iMessage. People seem to have a visceral negative reaction to green text bubbles, she says. The choice of the supposedly right or wrong smartphone even spills over into dating life. A student tells the newspaper that her friends once mocked her for chatting with potential lovers. "Oh my gosh, his texts are green," somebody allegedly said. One even said, "Ooh, that's gross." Apple itself also occasionally joined the debate ironically. In 2014, software boss Craig Federighi mocked Android users at the company's developer conference, calling them green bubble friends. Vox magazine journalist Lee Kwan Hunt once interviewed Apple CEO Tim Cook and accused him of not allowing his mother to see videos he sent her. The interoperability between Apple and Android devices is to blame. Cook responded, "Buy your mom an iPhone." This green bubble, blue bubble phenomenon has now become a meme on social networks. On platforms like TikTok, for example, teenagers started to make fun of people with green text bubbles. This is a so-called red flag, a warning sign that you shouldn't date somebody. There is even merchandise. For example, t-shirts with the inscription, "Never date a green texter." Well, and that's the situation right now. But there is also a positive twist in this story. Just a few weeks ago, the company Apple surprisingly announced that it plans to open its messaging service also at least a little bit for Android users. Specifically, the company wants to introduce the so-called RCS standard in 2024. This is basically the successor to SMS, which is not only encrypted, but also offers classic messenger functions, such as sending high-resolution videos or pictures, or even these little dots when somebody types. This means that at some point this year, you should also be able to chat properly with Android users via the iPhone messaging app without noticing any major differences anymore. The fact that this step was taken at all might also have something to do with the fact that the Apple competitor Google had been pushing hard for the introduction of RCS also on Apple devices in recent years. The Android account on Twitter even once accused the company of bullying. "Texting should bring us together, and the solution exists. Let's fix this as one industry," Google wrote. Later, Google and several network operators also reached out to the European Union regulators for help. In general, the EU plans to require larger messenger services to work across platforms in the future. However, Apple has so far always pulled itself out of the affair. Its messenger service, the company argues, is simply too small in the European Union to fall under EU rules. Well, but now the fight is over, and Apple in 2024 will introduce this new RCS standard voluntarily also on iPhone devices. What sounds quite unimportant for me as a European should be a really big thing for people in the United States of America. However, one thing will not change according to media reports, and that's the color of Android messages. They will still be green in the future, not blue. So this little part of this two-tier system will remain. So, that's it. That was my video about WhatsApp and why it's not popular in the United States of America, where it was invented. I hope you learned something. I hope you liked this video. If you did, then please leave a thumbs up. You can also hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you won't miss any upcoming video. And if you'd like to support me and my work, you can also do that, for example, on Patreon. The link is in the description down below. Or you can become a channel member on my YouTube channel. Then you will also get exclusive stuff and new videos before everyone else. That's it for today. I'm back in 2 weeks on this YouTube channel. I wish you a great 2024, and so far, have a safe journey and see you next time.